Hello, and welcome back to the official podcast of the Bison Regional Science Fair, BRSF STEMcasts. Today we've got an episode that I'm sure my fellow overachievers will love. Today we'll be discussing achieving greatness and attaining recognition with Dr. Benedict Albensi. Dr. Albensi is the recipient of numerous academic awards, including the Western Brain Institute's Outstanding Achievement Award, the Sanofi BioGenius Challenge Canada Mentor Award, the Sanofi Aventis Biotech Challenge Award of Appreciation, as well as the William D. Carey Science Award from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Above all of this, Dr. Albensi is also the Manitoba Dementia Research Chair and the Everett Endowment Fund Chair. Dr. Albensi, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you. I just have one correction. I actually wasn't a recipient of the Western Award. I was a nominee.
Oh,
So just to set the record straight. But thank you for that kind introduction.
I don't think that detracts from your greatness, sir. Now, with such a repertoire of international awards, I thought it would make sense for Dr. Albensi to talk to us today about achieving greatness and global recognition for his work. Now, without further ado, let's get straight into the interview. So, Dr. Albensi, let's get the toughest question out of the way first. What inspired you to pursue science?
Well, that's a great question. And really, I was interested in science from a very young age. So when I was, 5 or 6, I knew I wanted to be either the president, a scientist, or an astronaut. And And so the president's a little different, but I'm still a lover of astronomy. I belong to the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. In fact, we have a meeting this Friday night. There's a Winnipeg chapter, and we have a couple telescopes in Winnipeg for those that are interested. But as a kid, I was interested in science in general, and when I became a teenager, my interests refined more. I was interested in cell biology and electronics. I used to build radios and other electronic equipment. And then, of course, I was interested in astronomy and the stars and planets. So those were just interests at a very early age. And so I did a lot of reading on my own and really took as much science as I could. So
I see. So as a globally recognized scientist, how do you achieve so much success?
Well, success doesn't always come overnight, and sometimes it comes in bursts. You'll have a few good months, and then nothing happens for a while. But I have several degrees. So I have a bachelor's in general science, and in those days, they didn't really have a neuroscience degree yet. And so I really kind of formed my own major in general science. I took physics and biology and psychology. And so I took quite a bit of science. I even took other sciences too that were unrelated to neuroscience. I took geography or geology. I took archaeology, cultural anthropology. I took paleontology. I took a lot of different types of science because I really wanted to be well-rounded in science. And then I went on and got a master's in biology and then a PhD in neuroscience. So by the time I got around to doing my doctorate degree, they actually had a neuroscience degree, and I did that at the University of Utah at the School of Medicine. And then typically what a scientist does is that you even get more training after your PhD. So I did a postdoctoral fellowship. I did 2 of them. I did one in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown University, where I used high field MRI, so magnetic resonance imaging, a type of imaging that I think a lot of people are familiar with. And I used it to look at head trauma and memory. And then I did a second postdoctoral fellowship with a very famous scientist, Mark Mattson. In fact, he's the most highly cited neuroscientist in the world for the last 20 years. I worked with him when I was at the University of Kentucky. And in particular, we were at the Sanders Brown Center on Aging. And Sanders is actually Colonel Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken. So I was in Kentucky, and they had the Center on Aging named after him, because he gave a large donation for aging research. So I worked with Mark, and that was my second postdoctoral fellowship. I worked at Pfizer for a while on clinical trials research. And then I worked at the Cleveland Clinic doing more research. And then finally I moved to Canada and became a professor here.
I see.
So those are the sorts of things I did in order to get my degrees and some of my experience.
Hmm.
But then there's other things you do too. I mean, you take certain classes, you get certifications. I've done a lot with clinical research. So I probably have over 12 different certifications for clinical research. I
Hmm.
conduct both clinical research in my lab and also experiments with test tubes and petri dishes and that sort of thing.
Hmm. So, on that note of all of the doctors, all of the degrees and stuff, what advice would you give to aspiring doctors or people who are in medical school right now?
Well, that's a great question. And so, science, I don't want you to be afraid of science, but science is highly competitive.
Hmm.
And especially if one wants to be a physician or a specialist of some sort. So I think you really have to learn how to get good grades. You have to learn how to
Hmm.
get A's. You really need to get mostly A's in order to get into medical school.
Hmm.
You also have to really find out if you're cut out for it. And there's lots of options to get a medical degree, an MD. There's also an osteopathic medical degree in the US. I think there
Hmm.
might be one osteopathic college in Canada too. So you get an OD, and an OD has all the same privileges as an MD, except it's a different training process. It's more of an emphasis on the whole body and the whole organism
I see.
as opposed to reductionism.
Hmm.
So it's a slightly different philosophy, but it's been around since the 1800s.
Ooh.
And so I think you really have to, you probably should volunteer, work in a lab, work in a clinic,
Hmm.
meet some scientists and physicians, spend some time with them, find out what their day-to-day life is like. And there are other things that one can do. So, I mean, you don't have to actually be a bench scientist or be a professor.
Hmm.
In fact, sometimes people will work in industry, they'll work in the pharmaceutical industry, or they'll work in the biotech industry. And
Hmm.
so I encourage people to think about combination degrees, a PhD with a business degree, like an
Hmm.
MBA, or an MD with a law degree. So you have these interesting combinations, and it really can set you apart from others because, like I
Hmm.
said, it is a highly competitive area.
Right.
So that's some of the things you can do.
All right. So, what advice would you give to young scientists or perhaps people in high school like myself who would like to pursue greatness in their contributions to the science community?
Well, really, like I said earlier, you can't be afraid of science. You
Hmm.
have to take as many science classes as you can. And you really have to recognize that science is a way of thinking.
Hmm.
And it's not just another subject, it's really a way of thinking. I mean, to test a hypothesis and to test an idea, you have to have that kind of follow through to be able to be accurate and precise and to continue doing stuff even when it gets boring.
Hmm.
Because every day, science is not exciting every day. So
Right.
you have some days or even weeks or months where it can get kind of boring and monotonous. So you just have to stick it out and maintain your level of commitment. So that's
Hmm.
part of it. Um, so I think you really have to learn about all the different types of science. I mean,
Hmm.
if you want to be a scientist, it goes anywhere from being an ecologist to being a molecular biologist
Right.
or being an astrophysicist.
Hmm.
And there's advantages and disadvantages. I also encourage you to go to the best schools you can, especially if you're going to get a PhD.
Hmm.
Try to go to a top 20 school if you can possibly do that.
Hmm.
And if so work hard, get good grades, go to the best schools you can,
Hmm.
and then things start to work out.
I see. So, drawing back to all of the awards, how does one go about applying for awards or getting recognition for their work in general?
Well, it's a little bit like fishing. So if you
Okay.
don't have your line in the water, you're not going to catch any fish. So you
Hmm.
really have to continue to try for as many awards as you can. And you have to realize you're not going to get some of them. And in
Hmm.
fact, in some cases, you might not get most of them. I mean, you have to figure out how much time you have. You can't just apply for awards all the time.
Hmm.
So you have to find which ones are most appropriate for you,
Hmm.
for your level and your background and what you've accomplished. But you really have to apply for as many awards as you can,
Hmm.
and that comes to grants as well, and other types of fellowships. And there are actually more fellowships and grants out there than you think.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, they just don't get a lot of media attention, or there aren't any announcements. So sometimes you have to surf the web and look for these on your own.
Hmm.
So uh, and your career counselor might not be aware of half the grants and fellowships or awards that are out there. So you kind of have to hunt. You have to ask people like myself, ask physicians, ask scientists, or ask professors. And then look for societies. You know, when you surf the web, look for different societies. If you're interested in aging or Alzheimer's disease, you go to those websites that talks about Alzheimer's or aging research. And so you get an idea what professional societies there are. And then once you go on their websites in particular, you start finding awards, scholarships. And even like I belong to the Sons and Daughters of Italy because my grandparents both immigrated from Italy to the US. And so they have their own scholarships for high school students and for college students.
I see.
And so there are many cultures that do that. And so that's another avenue for trying to get money or awards or help with school and support.
So moving on, as an expert in the field of of neurobiology, what exactly comes with the field? What can you do with a degree in it, and how far can you go with it?
Well, every day is different. So, the field continues to grow. So I've been a member of the Society for Neuroscience for over 25 years. And when I started going to the meetings, there were maybe 10,000 people. If you go to a meeting now, there's over 30,000 people that go to the Society for Neuroscience meeting. It's an international organization for the advancement of neuroscience. And again, it's very broad in scope. So there's everything from artificial intelligence to neural networks to molecular biology, molecular neuroscience. There's also systems neuroscience. There's really everything that you can imagine that involves the brain or the nervous system would be covered at a meeting like that. So there's lots of different levels, and so. And going forward, we're going to see even more robotics and different sort of applied fields. We're going to see more integration with biomedical engineering and neuroscience. You're going to see advancements in many of these areas, especially for surgery, clinical decision making and support using artificial intelligence to help a physician or even help scientists in making decisions about data, especially big data.
Right. So, as it seems we're running out of time, Dr. Albensi, do you have any parting advice you'd like to give our viewers?
Well, like I said, science is not just a subject, it's a way of thinking. And so don't be afraid of science. And there's going to be more failures than successes. That's true of doing an experiment, working on a science project. You might get all negative data. You really have to do it because you're passionate about it. And if you have a bad teacher, everyone has a bad teacher once in a while, or a teacher that doesn't express themselves as clearly as they can. Don't let that stop you. So don't, just because you have a bad situation or maybe even get a bad grade, if you really love science, then you really have to go for it and commit yourself. And don't, you just have to shake off a bad experience and just continue on. So.
I see. So thank you again, Dr. Benedict Albensi, for being here. It was an honor.
Well, thank you. And good luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, let us know what you guys think down in the comments or on our socials at BRSF_MB on Instagram or at BisonFair on Twitter. Make sure to like and subscribe for all the latest news in STEM and all the best science fair tips and tricks, and we'll see you next time on STEMcasts. Bye-bye.